All right, let's dive into the mind of one of the most influential people on the planet, Bill Gates. He recently did this massive, wide-ranging interview, and we've pulled out the absolute best parts. His thoughts on everything from the future of India and extreme wealth to his own personal fears and what he thinks it really takes to change the world. Okay, let's get into it. So, the guy interviewing him, Raj Shamani, kicked things off with this amazing quote about a dream he once had. And honestly, that's our goal right here, in this explainer. We're going to use Gates' own words to try and do just that. Get a rare look inside that brain of his.
So where do we start? Well, our first stop is his take on India. This is a country he's been deeply involved with for decades, first at Microsoft and now with his foundation. And what he sees today is a nation that has just completely transformed. What he's seeing in India now is it's a total game changer. He remembers how, back in the day, Microsoft would hire these incredible engineers from India to come work in the US. But now, the innovation is happening right there. It's become this global hub for creating brilliant, low-cost solutions that can then be exported to the rest of the world. It's a complete flip of how that talent used to flow.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about something huge: money. Specifically, what do you do with all of it? Because his philosophy on wealth and family, well, it pretty much flips everything we think we know on its head.
So it all boils down to this one question, right? For most people, the answer is a no-brainer. Of course, you provide for your kids. But for Bill Gates, yeah, his answer is very, very different.
Get ready for this number. Less than 1%. That is it. That's how much of his mind-boggling fortune his children are going to inherit. It's a wild decision. It goes against every instinct we have about legacy and family. So you have to ask, why? What's the logic here?
And this slide really breaks it down perfectly. You've got the traditional way, building a dynasty, versus his way. He's actually said that just dumping a ton of money on his kids would not be doing them a favor. He doesn't want to create some kind of corporate dynasty. Instead, he wants to give them a great education, sure, and the freedom to forge their own path. But that capital, that massive pile of money, he sees it as a resource for humanity to solve the world's biggest problems.
So we've talked about his philosophy on money. Now let's pivot to his philosophy on work. How exactly did he build Microsoft from nothing? Well, it took an intensity that, honestly, he describes in a pretty jaw-dropping way.
And he has zero regrets about it. He's like, look, in my 20s, I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids. Being a maniac was absolutely the right thing to do. He knew his competitors thought he was crazy for working so hard, and his response was basically, yep, and that's why I'm winning.
But you know, people evolve. The Bill Gates of today is not the same 25-year-old programmer who could practically live in the office for 3 days straight. That raw stamina, that pure coding genius, it's now complemented by decades of accumulated knowledge and wisdom. And that's allowed him to shift from that super narrow focus on software to tackling these massive, complex global issues.
So what's the one thing that connects that young maniac to the global philanthropist we see today? It all comes down to this. His success isn't just about being smart. It's about never, ever stopping being a student. And that third point, he says that one's the hardest. Being brutally honest with yourself about what you actually know versus what you think you know. That self-awareness, that's the real engine.
Okay, so with that mindset, where is he focused now? I mean, what does a guy who spent his entire life solving problems think are the biggest ones we have left? You know, what's actually keeping him up at night?
And here they are. This is his list of the big ones. Now, he's been talking about pandemics for years, way before it was on everyone else's radar. But look at what's at the very top of the list now: shaping AI properly. He sees it as this unbelievably powerful force for change, and making sure we get it right, that has become his #1 priority.
But here's the catch. Even for a guy who believes so deeply in technology and scientific solutions, he admits there's one problem that money and code just can't seem to crack: people. Us. Whether it's trying to convince people to adopt healthier habits or getting rich countries to care about what's happening in poorer ones, he says changing human behavior is still one of the hardest challenges in the world.
All right, for this last part, we're going to peel back that final layer. We've talked about how he sees the world, how he works, and what he's worried about. But now, let's get a little more personal and try to understand the man himself.
So, what do you think is Bill Gates' biggest fear? It's not the usual stuff like heights or flying. When he was asked, his answer was really personal and surprisingly human.
This. Think about that for a second.
For a man whose entire life, whose entire joy has been defined by his ability to learn, to process information, and to solve puzzles, the scariest thought in the world is losing that very capability. It's not about losing fame or fortune. It's the fear of that joy of learning fading away.
So after all this, what does he want his legacy to be? You know, he says he doesn't think about his epitaph. His real goal is absence. He wants to solve problems so completely that future generations don't even know they existed. For a word like polio, which terrorized generations, to become nothing more than a historical question mark.
And that really leaves us with a final, powerful question to think about. What if we measured our own impact, not by what we're remembered for, but by the problems we help the world forget? Thanks for tuning in.